All right, y'all. So as we continue our never-ending search of the truth and trying to decipher between the lies, this next video is the CIA's classified book about the pole shift and mass extinctions. Were we being lied to? We're going to try to figure that out. So if you're new, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button, join the family, and spam that like button. Let's go.
Could the Great Flood happen again? History enthusiasts have been asking this question for years. Global flooding isn't mentioned in the Bible alone, but also in the myths of many civilizations, so it's quite possible that all of them describe the same cataclysm. However, the legends say that during the disaster, water covered all the land, including the highest mountain peaks. But scientists' assessments show that for such a disaster to happen, Earth would have to be flooded by at least 2 more global oceans. Does this mean the ancients exaggerated the scale of the flood and we can relax? Not so fast. Chan Thomas, a former CIA agent, is absolutely sure the global flood can not only happen again, but it will definitely repeat, and it'll be in the nearest future. So when and why will Earth be overwhelmed by the irresistible force?
I think he got a little carried away with the music, right? I couldn't even hardly hear him speak at one point in time. But I love the animation and dramatization of the video, man. That's what just keeps me drawn in.
Why are some people so sure that something like a global flood ever occurred? Of course, the fact that it was described by different nations that it never interacted with one another is rather convincing proof. But what if it's just a mere coincidence? What other sources could we refer to? Nowadays, our idea of what the world was like in ancient times is mainly based on seafarers' maps. Voyagers needed to depict everything as precisely as possible because their lives literally depended on it.
Yep.
However, some of these drawings only pose new questions. For instance, a map by Piri Reis, an Ottoman navigator created in 1513, shows Antarctica, which Europe would only learn about 300 years later. More so, on the old document, a part of land connects it to South America. And where's the giant Drake Passage, which separates the continents today? It's present on a later map created in 1685, but it's really tiny. Though the locations of the other parts of the land are pretty relative too. In this case, the cartographers put more emphasis on ocean currents, and the comments on the map state that some of them had changed their direction by that time, which is why voyagers required an updated version. A large-scale water cataclysm could have actually changed the current's course. Besides, scientists have some other, more convincing evidence that the greater part of the land on our planet was submerged. This is American geologist J. Harlan Bretz, labeled mad by the academic community for over half a century. The reason behind that is that starting from 1923, he published a series of sensational articles on the origin of the Columbia Plateau relief. The researcher drew attention to the many wide, flat areas in the region. Bretz was convinced that regular, slow erosion couldn't be the cause behind such abnormal terrain. He tried various theories and concluded that only a global flood could have led to it. Nonetheless, the Geological Society hurried to reject Bretz's theory, calling it ugly. It's quite an emotional statement for people who usually use as neutral expressions as possible, isn't it? And while his colleagues were making fun of Bretz, claiming the researcher had simply read too many myths, Christians started real persecution. They said the researcher was blasphemous, trying to combine the biblical Great Flood and science. For decades, Bretz was an outcast, and it could have all gone on that way.
Yeah, but isn't that... I didn't think religions would judge people for their beliefs like that. Isn't that kind of contradictory in a sense? Just posing the question. I would have never thought I'd heard religion do that to someone.
For decades, Bretz was an outcast, and it could have all gone on that way. except that technological advances enabled the creation of the first satellite maps. On them, the abnormally broad areas of the Columbia Plateau became obvious to absolutely everybody, and the marginal Great Flooding theory suddenly went mainstream. In 1979, when Harlan Bretz was 97 years old, the Geological Society of America officially recognized the scholar's theory and, as an excuse, even awarded him the top prize, the Penrose Medal. But why, until then, did scientists refuse to even listen to anything about this interesting suggestion without even attempting to debunk it? Had they been trying to conceal this information until the last moment? And if, in this case, justice was eventually served, what about the other flood hypotheses deemed pseudoscientific even today? In 1966, a retired CIA agent, Chan Thomas, published a book titled The Adam and Eve Story. It was a significant breakthrough for the author because previously, for some reason, no publisher had been willing to print his work. However, right after publication, Thomas's ex-colleagues from the CIA classified the Adam and Eve story. They disliked its contents so much that the American government tried to erase any reference to his work. What if those were the...
That sounds awfully familiar. No, they'd never do nothing like that, you think? That whole erase you, it seems like they're known for that, right?
Government tried to erase any reference to his work. What if those were the CIA agents who had prohibited publishers from publishing the book? But
why even try to erase that? Why? Why are you trying to control and manipulate what you want out or what you deem to be beneficial to you to be put out? That's that man's thoughts and his theories. And why try to erase everything he's... Yeah, see, this is why I'm so skeptical of CIA.
Strangest thing is that we still don't know what exactly Chan Thomas wrote about. In 2013, American activists demanded the book be declassified, invoking the U.S. Freedom of Information Act. The CIA accepted the request and said they'd try to solve the problem, but they kept it on hold for another 6 years. And only in 2019, when the activists requested access again, a file titled The Adam and Eve Story appeared on the CIA website. But it only contained 57 pages instead of the original 284, and even they had undergone editing. But what could Chan Thomas have written about in his work that even 70 years later, the CIA still views as dangerous?
But why put out some of it instead of releasing the whole thing? Don't give us what you think you want us to know. Either give us the full thing or don't give us none of it at all. Like, that's just wrong.
Declassified and edited pages from Chan Thomas' book led to one main conclusion. The author was convinced a true apocalypse awaits us. Moreover, it's bound to happen within the upcoming 100 years. Thomas states it'll all start with earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, which will be happening simultaneously all over the planet. But the most terrible thing will come next. Due to a shift in the Earth's crust, waves as high as 2 or 3 kilometers will rise in the ocean. They'll be able to annihilate not only coastal cities and towns, but entire countries. And if such an apocalyptic scenario is really possible, could the recent earthquakes in Turkey and Syria and the volcanic activity on Indonesian islands be precursors to the new flood? But how did Chan...
That's what I would be thinking. We've seen a lot. It just had a massive earthquake here recently. That just happened. I was just reading about it. I don't have the article handy, or I'll pull it up and read y'all the clip. And then we're seeing all of this stuff happen, man. Like you said, this could be a prelude to what's to come.
And Thomas come up with the idea that the Earth would die soon. What exactly is supposed to launch this chain of disasters? The ex-CIA agent was sure the primary trigger would be an interchange of our planet's poles, though not magnetic, but physical. Roughly speaking, the planet's thin crust will slide on the melted mantle so that the North will become the South and vice versa. And they're not Chan Thomas tales, since scientists had developed this hypothesis long before him. In 1953, an American professor, Charles Hapgood, published an article arguing that the Earth's crust is in constant motion because our planet's magnetic field occasionally undergoes changes. When the oscillations are insignificant, Earth's physical poles only shift several kilometers. But in exceptional cases, according to Hapgood, a complete inversion may occur, and the North becomes the South and vice versa. The scientists thought these inversions were responsible for most unexplainable geographic anomalies and even global cataclysms. Hapgood was certain that we're not the first civilization on Earth at all. It's just that all the previous civilizations fell during global disasters, while those that survived had to rebuild society from scratch several times. Notably, Albert Einstein supported this incredible theory. Hapgood's book on the spontaneous...
Listen, and I'm going to tell y'all right now, y'all know I don't get on planes, but if this is right and we start seeing things happen, guess who's going to be on a plane trying to hover above all this stuff until it dies down? This guy. That'll be the one time I do get on an airplane.
Pole shifts became the first work to which the renowned physicist agreed to write a foreword. But even despite such support, the ideas of the drifting poles never spread widely. Just like with Brett's, Charles Hapgood and his hypotheses were mocked by the academic community. However, over the years, the reasons to laugh are becoming fewer and fewer, since indirect evidence for this seemingly fantastic theory is only accumulating. In 2007, on the Russian Yamal Peninsula, a forest ranger found a fossil mammoth calf. He later named the find Lyuba after his wife. The baby mammoth differed greatly from her cousins previously found by archaeologists, as she was perfectly preserved. But the most exciting thing was waiting for scientists during the dissection. They found undigested plant remains, including some tropical flowers in Lyuba's stomach. But how did these exotic plants end up in cold Siberia? Does this mean that it used to be a paradise? Some scientists assume that mammoths' remains in Russia are so well preserved owing to a sudden, shocking temperature shift. Roughly speaking, it grew cold so swiftly that the dead animals' bodies just didn't have time to decompose. So, did mammoths initially live in jungles and eat tropical fruits before they died suddenly of hypothermia? This is how it would be if Earth's poles inverted.
That's what I was about to say. That's going to be scary then. If the poles do shift, then there's no time to think you have time to figure out a plan. No, we need to have a plan in place now. It's not going to be enough time. They couldn't even migrate somewhere else. It wasn't even possible for them to.
Their position. Besides, back in 1899, a Russian scholar, Vasily Dokuchayev, astonished the academic community with his study of the northern hemisphere's soils. His analysis indicated that the lower layers in Greenland received even less sunlight millennia ago than they do today. In other words, back in the day, Greenland could have been our planet's northernmost point. It might seem the difference is not that big, but if you shift the pole this way, global climate zones will move substantially, and then tropical plants could indeed have grown in Siberia. Moreover, this theory was recently backed by discoveries from an area seemingly far away from geology: architecture. Ancient temples and places of worship were usually built considering the position of the sun on specific days, like during the spring and autumn equinoxes. It means that such monumental complexes' layouts strictly match the position of the cardinal points. And if a pole used to be in a different place, most of the ancient structure's orientation should match it. What a coincidence, then, that the Cambodian Kokare Pyramid isn't oriented towards a point we now view as the North Pole, but Greenland. The same is true for the Teotihuacan Temple in Mexico and the Berlin Cathedral, as well as at least 40 other monumental structures worldwide. It appears that since the times when these temples were built, the pole has really changed its position slightly. But what actually underlies this planetary disaster mechanism? From a scientific perspective, how can some magnetic oscillations cause an interchange of the physical north and south? This is a tippy top, and its main feature is its displaced center of gravity. At some point after spinning, the top turns upside down, but continues spinning on its stem. Basically, the north and south invert. But why? For many years, scientists thought the effect was caused by friction. However, none of them could accurately calculate the model based on this hypothesis. The correct answer was found only in 1985 by pure accident. Being on board
But before the bottom becomes the top and vice versa, everything in between may have a moment that it's the actual north and south pole. So that could land us as being it. That would be bad, bro. Extremely bad.
A Soyuz spacecraft, a Soviet cosmonaut, Vladimir Janabekov, paid attention to a strange peculiarity. As a rule, in zero gravity, he didn't need to apply force to take a wing nut off a cable to pack things. The astronaut just tapped it with his finger and then caught the slowly floating nut. But that day, Janabekov didn't catch it. To his amazement, having covered some distance, the nut suddenly revolved around its axis and then, still spinning, went on floating along its trajectory. After a while, it returned to its original position, not ceasing movement. Janabekov couldn't believe his eyes. Then the cosmonauts similarly launched other objects, and they all repeated the trick. Scientists immediately began studying the mysterious phenomenon and came to the conclusion that spinning in zero gravity, slightly asymmetric things may flip after particular periods, doing it exactly 180 degrees. Notably, after such a flip, they go on spinning in the same direction. It turns out that the body keeps spinning on the same axis relative to the outer world, but its poles interchange. The researchers discovered that the same thing happens to objects whose center of gravity is displaced a little bit. That is, virtually any kind of body. The tippy top inverts to its stem, driven by the Janabekov effect. But could something similar occur on a global scale? Just like any other celestial body, our planet isn't a perfectly geometrical sphere with evenly distributed mass, and it's more than enough for it to invert one day, just like the wingnut did. Could the Great Flood have been a consequence of such a somersault? You're probably right that the pole shift wouldn't go unnoticed, but what if it wasn't our whole planet that overturned, but only the core inside of it? After all, the magnetic field and its alterations mentioned by different researchers are created mainly by liquid iron fluxes inside the core. Quite recently, in January of 2023, employees at Peking University published an article in which they argue that Earth's core stopped rotating relative to its other layers back in 2009, and it'll soon begin spinning in reverse. The fact itself seems absurd, but if the core really moves according to the Janabekov effect, everything falls into place. But whatever might occur inside, on the outside, our planet has 1.5 billion cubic kilometers of water on its surface. What will happen to it if Earth overturns? The same thing that happened thousands of years ago. After the somersault, the solid part of the planet will start moving according to the new magnetic poles. But water in the global ocean has no solid connection with the surface, so it'll try to preserve its old direction by inertia. This means all the oceans, seas, and lakes on Earth's surface will start moving with acceleration relative to the solid surface. Massive tsunamis will hit most land areas, and the water currents will be so strong that they'll be able to wash off.
I didn't even think about that. Now, when I said it would be bad, I was just thinking about the cold rushing in on everybody immediately, impactfully, and you not even having time to come up with a plan. I didn't even think about the water shifting to compensate. Oh my, bro, this could be this would be catastrophic. Not could be. This would be the end of it. This is the reset button that everybody talks about. This is the reset button.
Of whole islands and isthmuses, and it seems this is what happened during the Great Flood. Besides, we have indirect evidence. Differences in the Drake Passage width. Scientists assess that in the case of the pole shift, the water would have broken a path to itself between Antarctica and South America. So is it not a mistake that these continents are conjoined on the old maps? Was it a global disaster that altered our geography? But even if we admit that Earth's surface underwent a drastic change once, what should we expect next? When will new cataclysms flood our planet? To find out, we need to look at what's currently happening to the magnetic field. Dr. Nicholas Thuvany from the European Center for Research and Teaching of Environmental Geosciences, France, has been trying to answer this question for years. He discovered that to make a pole shift possible, our planet's magnetic field must weaken by about 90%. But in the most recent 3,000 years, Earth's magnetic field has already lost over 30% of its intensity, and this trend is increasing. Even today, there's an abnormal area on our planet that could be a precursor to disaster. This is the South Atlantic anomaly, where Earth's magnetic field is at least 3 times lower relative to other regions. Professor Chris Findlay from the Technical University of Denmark has led the program to study this phenomenon for many years. However, in one interview, he confessed that scientists still haven't got a clue of what could be causing such weakening. The only thing experts can state for sure is that the anomaly only continues intensifying and spreading, and it doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. Does this mean we'll witness a polar shift in the subsequent second Great Flood in the near future? How do we save ourselves? The good news is that given today's technological development, humanity could handle a similar cataclysm with minimal casualties, especially if we act cohesively. And
I can't wait to hear how, because all I see is mass casualties and extinctions, like the video title stated in the beginning. Like, all I see is that. So how? What plan do we have in place, and why have we not heard of this?
prepare properly. The bad news is that we shouldn't fear the flood as much as the anomalies that'll occur on Earth together with it. These loggerhead sea turtles orient in space using the force and orientation of the magnetic field. If the Earth's poles interchange, the poor animals won't have a chance to reach their wintering areas in time and will freeze to death. And if that doesn't look like much of a problem to you, think about the following. Apart from turtles, the magnetic field is essential to at least several hundred other species, from whales to birds to bats. A serious electromagnetic anomaly will make whole ecosystems vanish, and it'll happen even before the global flood begins. However, people are gonna have a tough time too. In 2003, on Halloween Eve, a geomagnetic anomaly happened on Earth. However, it wasn't caused by magma movement in Earth's core, but rather the opposite, a flash from space. That day, the sun hit Earth with a series of magnetized plasma fluxes. We still don't know the exact power of those eruptions since the machines supposed to measure them went out of order, having already registered the maximum indices possible. When the solar plasma hit our planet's magnetic field, airports had to cancel hundreds of flights worldwide since planes' onboard navigation systems simply became useless. Many people didn't even know what had happened as the geomagnetic storm had disrupted.
Put your hand up in the comment section if you knew what happened, because I didn't. I'm still clueless. I'm just finding out about it now.
Did most radio stations. Moreover, the number of heart attacks and strokes on that fateful day soared by as much as 90%. And the most terrible thing is that when the Earth's poles change, the consequences will be dozens or even hundreds of times worse. Scientists are already registering constant satellite malfunctioning over the South Atlantic geomagnetic anomaly. When flying over this area, the machines just lose control. Likely, we'll soon witness something similar all over Earth. It means that people will be without any means of communication. Is it worth mentioning what kind of chaos will erupt on our planet if the internet goes down in its every nook and cranny for many years? On the very first day, big companies all over the world will lose billions of dollars, but their management probably won't be able to worry about it too much as banking systems will go defunct as well. Soon afterward, phones and laptops.
I know. I already know what y'all are gonna say. I already know. Just put it in the comment section, man. People have been trying to tell us to get prepared, be prepared. It's coming. I know y'all were gonna say that. Put it in the comment section.
Will become useless metal scraps, as the Earth's geomagnetic storm flooding Earth could lead to extended blackouts all over the world. And on top of everything, people will be left without electricity. If the Great Flood destroyed civilization thousands of years ago, today we could revert to the primitive communal system even before the disaster itself. For that to happen, it's enough just to take away electricity and communications from us. But while we're trying to solve the mysteries of the geomagnetic anomalies, thousands of other no less ominous processes are happening on Earth. 450 million years ago, our planet faced a mass extinction caused by a drastic drop in the oxygen level. Back then, it was the abrupt cooling as a result of which plants all over the planet stopped photosynthesizing. However, today, the oxygen level in the atmosphere is also constantly decreasing. This time, it's all because of human activity. It looks like numerous disasters are competing for the right to destroy us. Do you think we have at least a small chance of survival? And will we be able to rebuild civilization from scratch?
I think this would be, like I stated earlier, the Great Reset. This would be a reset. You know, people talk about that all the time and how many times the planet has went through a reset. So even in biblical and religious terms. So I don't know, man. How do you survive a reset? I just don't see that as possible. So listen, y'all get at me in the comment section, man, and let me know what you thought. And had you even thought about this? Well, if you haven't, I'm glad you were here today. Spam that like button. Stick around and stay tuned. Till next one, I'm gone. Peace.